Hi, I'm Leah Brown, and I'm here to talk to you about the FMEA with regards to the risk and reliability assessment of a biosafety level 4 lab. I've broken down this into 4 categories: the HVAC, the biosafety spacesuit, the decontamination sequences, and the security measures protecting this biosafety lab. So basically, what you do in an FMEA is it's a way of assessing which failures are most likely to happen and analyzing that. So you choose a source of failure, how it happens, and then rate the probability of occurrence, the severity, and the detectability. In this study, I rated all of those on a scale of 1 to 10 because there's not really a standard for running this sort of operation on a biosafety laboratory. So I just went with what made sense. Looking at the HVAC system first, the things that I saw most likely to fail was a loss of negative pressure within the lab. Biosafety level 4 labs are kept under a negative pressure from the rest of the building so that if there is some sort of breach in the barrier, air flows in instead of out. This negative pressure is maintained by a dedicated calibrated HVAC system. And looking at the loss of negative pressure, the thing that was most crucial and most threatening was a leak in the air handling unit that would happen pre-filtration. Air handling units are used in all sorts of industrial buildings, and they aren't really made to certain standards. So unless an air handling unit was specifically commissioned for these biosafety labs, which I could not find any literature about, these air handling units aren't pristine, they aren't sealed off ideally. So a leak in this unit pre-filter could put some sort of something into the atmosphere. Another thing that's a big issue is the HEPA filters that filter all of the microbes out of the air in a biosafety laboratory. Looking at these filters, one could become clogged, and there are sensors. Basically, it's a pressure differential sensor across the filter that maintains whether it's working or not. And a clog is noticeable, it's very detectable, it has a severity of 2 because its detectability is 4. Basically, all that means is that microbes wouldn't get out, which is what you're looking for anyway. But if that filter were to tear, that has a severity I gave of 9, because then that's suddenly spouting microbes out into the atmosphere. It's not very likely, which gives it an RPN of only 81, but it still would be a very big issue. Moving on and looking at the biosafety spacesuit, this is definitely the chink in the armor of a biosafety level 4 lab. It's the part that protects the personnel most directly, but it's also a rubber suit that comes into contact with very many sharp implements, as autopsies due to animal research are something very commonly conducted in a biosafety level 4 lab. When you're wearing one of these rubber suits, you've got large rubber gloves, like dish glove, like cleaning gloves, but bulkier, and you're handling things like scissors and scalpels, and you're breaking open chests of lab animals, and there's bone shards and all sorts of sharp things that can puncture the suit in some way, and in a worst case scenario, puncture the skin underneath the suit. Then, looking at the suit ripping in particular, the thing that I identified as most dangerous to the suit was actually catching it on something. Because the fact is that these suits are big, they're bulky, they're inflated, they're working inside of a balloon. And it's hard to be aware of everything that's around you when your ears are muted by rushing air and everything's inflated. So I said that a loss of positive pressure in the suit would be the most dangerous thing. The suits are operated under positive pressure for the exact opposite reason that the lab is operated under negative pressure. If there's some sort of breach in the suit, the air is blowing out so no microbes can get in, so it protects the personnel inside. But if this breach goes undetected for long enough, if it widens, if the hose is unplugged for any reason, like moving from room to room, then it's very possible for the positive pressure to be lost and for microbes to enter. And this is again so dangerous because it's very hard to know if you have some sort of breach in your suit. It's not obvious because you're big and bulky and focusing on the scalpel in front of you, so you might not know about the hole behind you. This is why personnel in biosafety level 4 environments are always encouraged to work with a partner who checks the back of their suit, because that's very important. Then, moving on to the decontamination sequence. This is an area that I've read about actual failures occurring, although sort of humorously, the failures didn't actually hurt anybody. Essentially, there's a decontamination shower when leaving the biosafety level 4 lab where you're in your suit and you stand under a boiling chemical shower for 7 minutes it's different depending on the virus that's being worked with, and in this case it was 7 minutes. The shower actually malfunctioned in this case and wouldn't turn off after 7 minutes. So while the personnel were sweaty and cranky and everything, there was no risk of anything getting out. It was a failure in the system, but it wasn't a failure that detracted from the main purpose of the system's existence. So I'm sure that in these very highly regulated military institutions, it was considered very unacceptable, and that all means have been gone through to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But as failures in the systems go, it was not a very large deal. So, looking at the decontamination shower and the shower malfunction, something that could actually hurt the system. There could be a clogged shower head, not enough chemical could come out to neutralize everything. A timer malfunction, like what I just talked about, it only has an RPN of 40 because it's just not that serious. A thermometer failure could be bad as well if the chemicals weren't hot enough to kill what they needed to kill. A badly connected air hose is something else that could mess up because these people are standing in the shower for upwards of 5 minutes. They really need to have the air connected to be at all comfortable in this situation. Then, looking forward at the decontamination sequence, here is where I put refrigeration malfunction. Or no, this is where I put fumigation malfunction. Some samples that are passed out are sterilized with a chemical fumigation process, and while this is a very effective process, it happens mostly in a closed room where it's not often watched over. So if anything were to go wrong, the detectability on that before it's catastrophic is low, and it could be very catastrophic as those samples go out into the main building. Also, there's an incinerator that frequently disposes of samples as well. And if that were to malfunction, again, not enough heat, not enough would be denatured, and there could be an incident with a microbe escaping. Then my fourth section that I looked at was security measures. I looked at the keypad malfunction. There's a security code entrance point at each of the doors into the lab that could be tampered with, the hard work gauge. That could experience water damage, which is way more likely than the other two because these labs are sprayed down with a bleach water solution all the time to try and sterilize their surfaces. So if that were to catch a keypad wrong, that could break, somebody could get in that's not supposed to get in. All of these things are rather detectable because, somebody goes into the lab that's not supposed to be there, and these things are under 24/7 surveillance, so that kind of thing is seen. But it's still scary that it's a possibility. Looking at unsecured access into the lab, there's stuff like unsecured access or a stolen passcode, which again, unlikely, but it could get somebody in a way that might not be detected until it was too late. Also, looking at personnel files, you have to pass all sorts of assessments to be able to work in one of these labs, especially at a governmental level. but it's not necessarily infallible that all of these tests would go through all right. So while these risks are not the highest because the security is very airtight in these facilities, they still exist and could pose a problem. So this has been my discussion of the FMEA for the risk and reliability assessment of a biosafety level 4 laboratory. Thank you very much for listening.